there, welcome back. This is my first video of the new year. Apart from like podcast appearances here or there, but my first like proper one. Anyone who follows my channel knows I'm usually fairly late when it comes to January to start videos. So I was even later and starting in February this time. You know, why not? So yeah, I'm a bit late, but it's just been like a rough month or two. January blues is just like hellish, and I didn't mean to wait this long. It just happened. But I do have a bunch of stuff anyway that'll cover what I watched over the holidays and January. So I have been watching things, I just haven't been doing videos on them. So this first video coming back is I'm going for like German Expressionism and films influenced by it, which I call two Nosferatus and a Faust. So the Nosferatus in question are the Murnau Nosferatu, which I'm sure I've talked about quite a bit, but I'm not sure I've done a video on it though. The Eggers Nosferatu, the new one that's just come out, and the Faust by Murnau. Now, I'm not doing the Herzog Nosferatu because, again, I'm sure I've talked about it a lot, but I have been doing some Herzog films individually. So it works better doing it that way than trying to rewatch it for this when I think it's a different beast. It's taking like what's Expressionism and doing something very new wave German 70s thing, and very kind of influenced by what Herzog was interested in at the time. So I think it deserves its own video apart from this. So I'm not just trying to squeeze in for a couple of minutes in this video. I'd rather do a proper thing with that one. I can bring in these ones because Faust I've already done a video on, but it was years ago and I hadn't seen it for years even before I did the video. So I was kind of talking about for any freshness. Well, first I've seen it a few days ago, so I've seen it fresh, I've seen it projected. Nosferatu, I've seen multiple times, and I watched it about a month before the Eggers film came out. The Eggers film I eventually saw, you know, not the best cinema, you know, distribution around where I live, so it took me a while to see that film. So, but eventually I got there. So I would say all these are excellent films. I adored all three films I'm trying to talk about. Nosferatu has been like a regular in my playlist since I was about 18 or something. I think I saw it when I was 18. It came out in like video in the early 90s. I mean, it'd been out before, I think. But I remember when I got it in the early 90s and when it was a film student, it was a big thing because it was very hard to get hold of. And it was not the one with the tint in it, it was just black and white, full black and white. I'm sure I'd seen it on TV before then, but I could be wrong. But it was still that thing of, it was just the black and white. You couldn't tell the difference between the colour, between the daytime and the nighttime through colour. It was just black and white print. And actually, Murnau had worked a film so that you'd have down tints for like blue for nighttime and sort of orangey for daytime, which is now in the new remasters of the film. So it's always been like one of those things where I saw it originally pure black and white, but most of the time I've seen it since then, since the DVD days, has been in the tinted colour. So I've seen the tinted one more often than I've seen the black and white one, is the best way to put it. So I pretty much now got to the point of I can barely remember the effect of just the pure black and white one, beyond the fact that you couldn't tell the difference between night and day. So it's a bit confusing, so it created an ominous feel to it. But I like the one with tints a little bit more, because it varies up a little bit, and I think it adds to the... I remember when I was watching the older version, the fact that it's just black and white made it feel a bit more monotonous. With the tinted version, you've got a differentiation, so the pacing feels better, and you know, that does help. The film, of course, is a masterpiece. the fact that it's silent really helps. Because I watched a little bit of that one they made about 4 years ago with Doug Jones. Eventually I'll get to do a review of that one once I finish it, because it is pretty painful because it's amateur production thing where they're doing the atmosphere of the old one but they're having dialogue, and it really doesn't work. Which is the thing is, Eggers had influenced by Nosferatu and had like sound dialogue and things like that, but he varied the film so that it would not be the same thing. It was an adaptation, it wasn't trying to recreate it. And you can't recreate it. You really need the feeling of, this is what it is, this is the specific stylization that we're going for, and this helps create the mood you want. So Murnau, with his film, understood the limitations of having no sound and worked his actors to be more expressionistic in their responses. That wasn't naturalistic, but it worked well for what he was trying to portray. And this film is wonderful. It just is wonderful. The hard thing about talking about it is just go see it. That's what useful to say. Just go see it. You'll see how great it is. Especially if you project. If you project it, you really see. Now, I'm sure I saw it in film school in the black and white thing projected, or it was a film society thing. I know I've seen it projected before, but not with the tints. And it really makes a big difference. It's just because it's designed for a bigger screen. It was designed for the atmosphere. So the acting doesn't feel as big when you're watching a bigger screen, because it feels more naturalistic to the environment that Murnau's creating. So everything feels better and when it's projected. That's one of the things. Certain films, you don't lose much when it's put to TV. In other films, you lose so much. And this is one of the films you lose a lot. It's still as good on TV. It's still a great film, but you can tell you're missing something. So when you see it like on a bigger screen, it does make the impact. In this sense of the way it's paced, the way it's delivers its slow building horror, means that the early sections are much more effective, because it's just that's the sense of unending nightmare just going through it. There's just no escape, and you do get a sense of the danger of the situation a lot more if you see it on a bigger screen. Because one of the problems in TV is certain things are really effective on the big screen, like little moments, become kind of dull on TV, because without the big screen you don't have the kind of context of where they fit and the progression of the shots. So something that can be a big thing in the bigger screen projection, in TV it looks like it's a dead shot, where it's like, why did you put that shot in? It doesn't really make an impact. And because in TV it's just something in the TV does not really affect you. Well, in the bigger screen it will. That's the big thing that Murnau, seeing Murnau's films on the smaller screen has a problem with that sometimes, is because he's directing film for the big screen, because there was no such thing as TVs when he was making the films. It was made for a big screen. Every shot was designed to project it on a massive screen, and that was how it's going to affect you. And that caused a lot in films from that period. I think nowadays people are a bit more aware of that you have to frame it carefully, because the TV sucks some of the energy out of it. So the better directors are aware of that problem, but the less good directors aren't still. So you get a lot of films, even modern days, where it's like there's a lot of dead shots when you're watching TV. But all get back to the point is, the film is a kind of waking nightmare when you're watching on a bigger screen, and you've got the sound coming through, and you've got that sense of dread and a sense of unending nightmare. Because it's just not a naturalistic film, and has no interest in being a naturalistic film. It's a fantasy story about a vampire bringing the plague to a town, and it's as a fairy story, really. As the thing is, the Nosferatu, Count Orlok, is a fantasy character. He's a corruption on nature. He stands outside of nature. All the other people around him are part of nature, but he's not. He stands outside of life. He stands outside of everything. And he just basically feeds on it. So he's an abstraction of life. And that's the film's always portraying. Like, he's just this thing that has to be destroyed in some way. And the way to destroy it ultimately is to find its weakness. And its weakness is how apart it feels from humanity. Notice I'm calling it. It doesn't feel like a person, it feels like an it. It feels like which is appropriate for who plays it in the new version of the film. But that was not intentional. But this thing is just outside of everything. And that's what makes it really effective, especially when you see it on a bigger screen. It just becomes less of a monster, more of this thing, this kind of leech on humanity that terrifies the Hutter, who's the Harker character from Dracula, and then eventually it's spread its malign influence to the town that he comes from, and sets his eyes on his wife. And his wife realizes the only way to kill it is to actually make it forget the sun's coming up, because Nosferatu was a vampire story that really created a myth in a powerful way of the sun can kill it, because it's not a natural being, so the actual sunlight will destroy it. And it made it so powerful that became a big thing in vampire lore for a long time. Even though in Dracula, which is based on, that's not the case. Dracula can survive in the sunlight. He doesn't have his powers in the sunlight, but his powers come from the darkness, but he can still move around as a human being. And in this one, he's not really a human being. He's a thing. He's a creature. He's just something that's repulsive. So this is a beautiful, beautiful film. I would urge you to see it. If you've got a projector, project it. It's really a very new experience just seeing it or if you can go and see this in a re-release somewhere in the cinema, go see it, because it really makes a difference. It's really a powerful film when it's seen properly. And so yeah, I'm hoping at some point it goes to 4K. They've done Count of Dr. Caligari in 4K, which is not half as good as this film. So I'm hoping because the new film came out, they'll do a 4K remaster, because it is just wonderful. Murnau is one of my favourite directors, which means I find it very difficult to talk about him. So, there you go. So I'm now going to the other Nosferatu, the Eggers version just now, and I'll come back to Faust. Nosferatu from the Eggers version is it's an adaptation. It's knowing an adaptation. It's not trying to be that thing. It's not trying to be Murnau's Nosferatu. The same way that when Herzog made his version of Nosferatu in tribute to the Murnau version, he was not trying to remake it either in the sense of a literal remake. He was doing his version of it. Because one thing that both these directors are massive admirers of Murnau, but they're also people who have their own agendas. So they're going to do a remake, but they're going to do their version of it, which is the best way to do it. I think if you do something that's too much of a bow to the original, it becomes kind of lifeless. It really does. It just doesn't really work. I think you need to have your own interpretation. So Herzog's Nosferatu feels very different from the Murnau version. In a way, some people hate it because they say it's lifeless compared to Murnau's. I love it, but it's got a different pace, it's a different feel, and it's one of those films you have to see the longer German version. The shorter English version doesn't work because it takes out too much of the atmosphere. The Eggers version is easier, I think, for people who are fans of the original, and I think it's easier for the general audience compared to the Herzog version. But it's still excellent, and it's still got its own soul. I think some people who liked Eggers stuff from The Lighthouse and The Witch find this a bit this one's a lot more you think this is more commercial. I know Dimitri Kraus, who did not like this one. he was saying it was too commercialised and it wasn't Eggers really. I disagree. I think it was excellent. I thought it was very personal, but I think he kind of knew the actual story is a kind of fairy tale story, and he knew they had to kind of conform in certain ways to what worked about the story. The stuff that even Herzog, when he was going very far from the source, was still tied into. I think that's just something about Nosferatu. You have to tie to certain things to make it work, because it's not Dracula. It's something else. It's a pared down version of Dracula, just like the Universal versions are pared down version of Dracula. The Coppola versions are pared down. The Hammer versions are pared down. I'm using those examples. Those are the ones you've probably seen or heard of. Those are the three most distinctive versions of the Dracula story outside Nosferatu. They've got their own strengths and weaknesses. Like the Coppola one adds a love story that's kind of sappy, but the visuals are so good it doesn't really matter. It's so over the top. The Hammer ones have their own feel that's starts off more an adventure story, but then it delivers its own mythology as films go on. The Universal one feels closer to Murnau because it was made like 10 years later, and it was influenced by him a little bit, but they never really did that much with Dracula. But it still has its own distinct feel. It's Americanized. There's even the Spanish Dracula being the same sets that have their own feel as well, because it's coming from a Catholic country in Mexico. So they've all got their different feels. So that's one taking a film that's 100 years old and reinterpreting it in its own way. Like Eggers is big into research and having people have what they would have at the time. In a way, I don't think Murnau cared about that much. I think Murnau liked the fantastical versions of the characters and the more poetic level of interpretation, so your subconscious was getting fed all the time. I guess the film is longer. It fills in certain things. It's filling in like in the Murnau version, Ellen, who's the Mina character, who's the love of the vampire, ultimately is one of the women that destroys him. She's almost a simple character, almost a cipher of what love is and what humanity can be at its best. In this version, she's very compromised. She's had visions her whole life. She's communicated with Nosferatu from as a child, and he's used her because she doesn't realise he's evil. And she's having visions, she's having fits, and she's a trouble to everybody who knows her because she exists in a plane that's not what we call reality. Like, the only reason she's not in a madhouse is because her husband keeps her calm. And her husband's played Nicholas Hoult in this one, and he's like the Harker character who has to go to the Count Orlok's castle. And so when he leaves, she starts to go a bit crazy, influenced by Orlok, Nosferatu, and it's a test of this marriage as they go through. Both of them go through hell in different ways. He goes through hell by going into hell, basically, and she goes through hell by being reconnected with a bad influence in her life and also losing her rock that will keep her stable. And you see both the characters go through the story with that dynamic in a way that before in the Murnau version you always come back to her with the Murnau version as well, but the narrative is more on him. And this one it feels much more like, because he's the focus of the first half and she's the focus of the second half in Murnau version. This one it's more they're both the focus through the film, because it is the communication between those two characters. Because Nosferatu character is like in the original a presence more than a character. He's this malign thing that's just destroying everything. He's a nothing. He's just like this animal that is just a predator, and how they react to him and his manipulations reveals a lot of their characters. Now other characters react to him and his malign influence reveals their characters in a way that wasn't really there in the Murnau version. It was much more, he's a malign influence but the characters are more stock, simple characters because it's kind of a fairy story. This one, it's more, they're more realistic characters. Like the Arthur Homewood character in this one is a married man with a family, played by Aaron Taylor Johnson, and he's got a wife played by Emma Corrin, who's, they're much more conservative and they've got money and they're tied to the society in a way that the Hutters are aspirational. Like the Nicholas Hoult character is trying to make the money so that his wife can be more comfortable. She, played by Lily Rose Depp, she's like someone who's not quite sure she just fits in society at all, and she's got an uneasy relationship with society. So it's a much more. It's almost like the have and have-nots and how they react to Nosferatu. And the have-nots are much better equipped to deal with Nosferatu than the haves. The haves are too comfortable. They've lost their kind of survival instinct, and a lot of the morality is based on defending themselves rather than trying to defend the whole town. Well, the have-nots, which are also the Van Helsing character played by Willem Dafoe, they're much more estranged from society, but they can see the bigger picture, that the way the members of society who are tied to their own place in it can't. And it's quite moving that way, because ultimately it's like the Aaron Taylor Johnson character. He's a decent guy. He's trying to do his best. He doesn't like certain people, but he's trying. So when things go bad for him, you do feel bad for him, even though somebody behaves badly. But you're feeling for him. The same way you're feeling for the Lily Rose Depp character who's been compromised by Nosferatu, because she can't quite work out what she's seeing, what she's not seeing, what's reality, what's not, and she's trying to get some grounding on how she's been manipulated. So you're feeling for everybody, and you're seeing the malign effect of this monster on them. Now, the Bill Skarsgård, who played it, is playing Count Orlok, and basically he looks very similar to Boris Karloff in Black Sabbath, but with a bit less hair. But he's still got that feel. It's like basically if Boris Karloff was somehow still alive or could be brought back from the dead, that's who they'd want to play this guy. But instead of Bill Skarsgård, tons of makeup doing the same thing, but it's that thing of it's basically very Karloff influenced and very Black Sabbath influenced, just the look, but it's also influenced by the look of the people at that time when Orlok was alive in that period. They were all real big moustaches and things, and he's not trying to Eggers not trying to redo the Max Schreck makeup from the first one, because it's been done a million times. There's nothing new there. It would not scare people, but just being a character more human looking, when in fact he's not human at all, adds a bit of creepiness to it. And in fact, he's always a dead man coming back to life and feeding on the lives of others is just there in every interaction, so it feels creepy and type of thing. There's that element of it which is not there in a lot of the other films. So it just works as a interesting new take on Nosferatu, because it's less fantastical, even though there's supernatural elements to it. It feels like there's a lot of black magical elements to it, and just darkness around humans that they can't quite confront, and there's just a sense of people being undone by the things they can't look at within themselves. And like Nosferatu is just like the executor. He's kind of the shark in Jaws. Really, that's it. That's all he is. He's just reacting. So it's a wonderful film. It's very dark. It's got lots of atmosphere. I wouldn't say it's scary. It's just more. It's kind of like Crimson Peak, whereas it's much scarier about people. People are rather than supernatural threat. Supernatural threat is there, but the way the people react is much scarier than anything the supernatural does. Supernatural stuff is wonderful to look at, and it's really done. It's more of a thing with how Nosferatu is than actual fear of him. It's the fear of what happens around him more than him himself. But it's a wonderful film. I adored it. It was just great. It felt kind of like influenced by early Cronenberg as well in lots of ways. It felt kind of that kind of feel like from like Shivers or Rabid, that kind of sense of this kind of infection getting loose in society. That kind of feel to it, like more than even doing a Nosferatu remake. That feel of early Cronenberg, but set in old times with supernatural elements, but still with that feel of a rotten society and why it's rotten, and watching all these men of science watching everything go to hell because nothing they do works. So, yeah, Nosferatu is terrific. The new one's terrific. Go see it. Finally, we have Faust. Faust is the Murnau version of Faust. I've done a video on it already. The reason I'm bringing it up just now is because I've just rewatched it and it's wonderful. I mean, again, I watched it projected. You lose so much from this film when it's not projected. And it's a film of separate parts. It's telling the story of Faust. It got into some bother with some of the kind of experts in Faust when it was released in Germany because it's an adaptation rather than being totally loyal to every little thing. In this one, Faust is a man who has grown old. He's believed in science. He's been trying to help people for years. He's been a believer in God, and he's tempted by Satan. And Satan's made a bet that if he can tempt Faust, who is the greatest, the great moral authority, he's not compromised like all these other human beings. He's a moral authority. If he can get him to sell his soul to the devil, all of mankind will fall to Satan, because if Satan can tempt the best of us, what's the rest of us worth? That's the general premise that Murnau goes with. And then basically he starts working on the weaknesses of Faust. Faust, when he sees, he brings a plague to Faust's town, killing hundreds, and Faust is losing his faith in humanity and losing his faith and faith itself. Is like, what good are these books to me when, you know, I can't do anything? And then Satan lets Faust see an image suggesting there's a way to contact Satan who could help him if he goes to the crossroads and Satan begs for him to come to him, which he does. So Satan appears in Mephisto and says, I'll give you a taster for an hour or for a day of what I can offer you, the magic I can offer you, and how you can cure these people. And Faust accepts it because he's doing anything to save the people. But then he sees the problem is that he can do it, but the sign of the cross, which is still within all of society, they're all believers in Christ and Christianity, that repels him. So he can save them, but they can see that he's been repelled by the cross, so he's in league with the devil. So he's chased away. And he's getting old, he's almost dying, and he feels like he's never really lived. He's always been in his books trying to help people. And Satan gives him back his youth and lets him be tempted by his flesh, and then lets him extend his period under the influence of Satan, saying, I'll let you live your life, your whole life, before I take your soul. And Faust is basically seduced by it all. He loves all these women and ends up finding that it's nothing. It's basically a big fat nothing he's missed. Is like there's nothing that really did it for the same way knowledge did. And this idea of knowledge has been destroyed by the plague and by what Satan showed him, and then his idea of romance has been destroyed. And basically, he's at his lowest ebb. This is halfway through the film when he meets Gretchen, who's a lowly woman with a poor family who he falls in love with. So the second half of the film is him trying to seduce Gretchen and show his worth to her, because she's not easily swayed. And of course, Satan and Super Mephisto is trying to make sure all of that goes horribly wrong, which it does. And it ends up Gretchen being like condemned as a witch and being a child killer and everything else, and everything goes completely awful for her. But she and Faust are redeemed by their love for each other at the end, which destroys Satan's pact and Satan's bet, and he loses the bet because Faust is redeemed by love. And it sounds tacky, but the way it's done is beautiful. Like, again, like Nosferatu, Murnau knows he's doing a fairy story of what the basics are of this myth, and cut away all the other stuff. What are the basics? So it cuts away of some of the Faustian arrogance that's in some of the stories. He takes away. He brings in the idea of faith as much more of an idea of what humanity means to Faust as much more of a driving stick for Faust rather than the arrogance of knowledge. And he just sticks to that, where Faust loses his patience for people, either en masse or individually, as he realises that through the seductions that there's nothing there for him. And then he just slowly brings back humanity with this woman who is decent, just simply decent. So it's a fairy story of cutting through all the egocentric elements and being redeemed by the basic thing that you were fighting for in the first place, which is love, is what Satan is missing. And it's just, the visuals are great. The visuals are all old-fashioned theatrical techniques, like basically like lots of models, lots of sets. Because it's in black and white, you know, they're models, but they're all very atmospheric, and Murnau builds some sets that evoke an atmosphere of not just dread, because they can be shot in the daytime and look interesting, but obviously from a poorer neighbourhood. Then you shoot at night and it looks threatening. It's just a knowledge of architecture, a knowledge of how images look in film, and just a knowledge of the build of the story. Like, the first half of the film is very fast paced, and then it slows really. As soon as he meets Gretchen, it slows down in a way that for some people will feel a bit like, well, this is padding now. But you need to go through that section, and that's the storytelling. Is like, you need to go through this to actually get to the redemption. And this is wonderful. The whole thing's wonderful. By the time you get to the end, it's just a masterpiece. It's just a wonderful film. And just the visuals, the way it's done. I mean, the acting, Emo Jennings is, or Jennings is Mephisto. He's like the guy manipulating the whole thing, and he's over the top, but it works perfectly for this film. Like in most other films, this would be too much, but in this film, the heightened atmosphere is perfect. The Mephisto, the Faust character, as an old man and a young man, works well, but he's but the thing is, it's not like massive psychological analysis. It's the myth of Faust, so it's like, we're not going to get the full thing. We're not going to get all the details. It's about the myth. It's about what this guy is and what he goes through. So, again, I've done Faust before, so I don't want to go on forever, but go watch it. It's beautiful. So I hope you enjoyed this video. Hope you go and watch all 3 of these films, because they're great. So hopefully that's a good first video for 2025. Right, bye.